The champagne flutes caught the crystal chandelier light like 1,000 tiny mirrors, each one reflecting fragments of London's most powerful faces. I watched from my position near the auction tables as the Grosvenor House ballroom filled with the kind of people who could change the world with a phone call or destroy it with a tweet. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Tonight was supposed to be about charity. The Global Children's Foundation had pulled out every stop for their annual gala, promising to raise millions for education programs across 3 continents. But standing there in my borrowed evening gown, press credentials heavy around my neck, I could feel something electric in the air, something that had nothing to do with philanthropy and everything to do with the collision of worlds that was about to unfold. The Royal Protection Officers arrived first, their earpieces creating ripples of anticipation through the crowd. Would he really come? After all the scrutiny about the monarchy's relevance in the 21st century, would King Charles III actually show up to an event crawling with Hollywood's most outspoken voices? The answer came at exactly 8:15. "Ladies and gentlemen," the announcer's voice carried across the suddenly hushed space, "His Majesty King Charles III." Charles entered with that particular royal pace, purposeful enough to acknowledge that time belongs to him differently than it belongs to the rest of us. He looked every inch the king, navy dinner jacket fitting perfectly, suggesting decades of training for moments exactly like this. But I noticed something the cameras probably missed: a tightness around his eyes, barely perceptible tension in his shoulders. Even kings must feel the weight of walking into rooms where their relevance is an open question. The crowd's applause was polite, measured, not thunderous adoration, but not stony silence either. The sound of a society unsure of its own feelings, clapping because protocol demanded it, while privately questioning whether protocol still mattered. Near the bar, tech mogul Jonathan Pierce held court with young influencers. "Inherited authority in the age of earned influence," I caught him saying. "It's like bringing a sword to a data fight." That's when I spotted him. Marcus Reed had built his career on sharp, uncomfortable truths that made people laugh because the alternative was crying. His Netflix specials dissected privilege and called out hypocrisy. He was exactly the kind of performer who could either perfectly compliment an evening about charitable giving or completely hijack it. Marcus stood near the stage entrance, eyes drifting toward the royal table with something calculating in his expression. I'd interviewed him once and remembered his philosophy. Comedy isn't about making people comfortable, it's about making them honest. The spotlight found Marcus like it had been waiting for him all evening. "Good evening, beautiful people," he began, voice carrying easily across the ballroom. "Look at this room. This is the kind of room where you could fund a small country's GDP just by passing a hat." Polite laughter rippled through the crowd, safe territory. "But you know what I love about this? Everyone here earned their seat. Athletes who trained until their bodies broke. Actors who waited tables and slept in their cars until someone noticed their talent. Entrepreneurs who turned dorm room ideas into global empires." The energy shifted, engagement replacing politeness. Each person in this room has a story of grinding, failing, getting back up, earning their place through blood, sweat, and probably a few nervous breakdowns. I could see Charles listening intently, his posture slightly more rigid than before. Marcus paused theatrically. "It's inspiring, really, because that's what this is all about, isn't it? Merit, effort, proving yourself worthy of the platform you've been given." His expression shifted, that glint anyone who'd followed his career would recognize. Of course, not everyone has to prove themselves the same way. I mean, let's be honest here. Some folks get respect the old-fashioned way, they inherit it along with the real estate. The temperature dropped several degrees. People suddenly realized they might be witnessing something more significant than routine entertainment. Marcus smiled wider. "Don't get me wrong, I have tremendous respect for tradition, I really do. But around here, crowns don't pay the bills. You earn respect by grinding, not by being born into it." The words hung in the air for a heartbeat that felt like an hour. Then the laughter came, but it wasn't uniform. It erupted in waves from different sections: the younger tables, the tech moguls, the artists who'd clawed their way to prominence. But other sections remained conspicuously silent, creating a patchwork of reaction that revealed the fault lines running through the gathered crowd. Charles's smile never wavered, but something fundamental had changed behind his eyes. I could see the muscles in his neck tighten, the almost imperceptible shift suggesting a man whose deepest assumptions about respect and authority had just been challenged in front of an international audience. The charity auction proceeded with polished efficiency, but I could feel the room's attention split between the items on stage and Marcus's performance aftermath. I moved through the crowd during breaks, my Priss badge opening conversations that revealed the deep fractures his joke had exposed. At the tech tables, the response was almost uniformly positive. "Finally," whispered renewable energy founder Sarah Chen, "someone said what we've all been thinking. Why should birth lottery matter more than actual contribution?" But 3 tables over, Lord Hamilton and his wife sat with other titled guests, expressions ranging from uncomfortable to openly offended. "It's simply not done," Lady Hamilton said quietly. "There's a way to conduct oneself at events like this. Tradition exists for reasons." Humanitarian activist and actress Elena Vasquez found herself caught between worlds. She'd built her career challenging inequality, but had worked closely with the royal family on charitable initiatives. "I understand the sentiment," Elena said carefully, "but I've seen firsthand the incredible work His Majesty does for disadvantaged communities. The crown isn't just ceremony, it's a platform for service that reaches places celebrity influence can't touch." The age divide was striking. Younger attendees seemed energized by Marcus's words, clustering together with phones out to capture reactions. Many had built careers in industries that didn't exist when current protocols of royal deference were established. For them, Marcus had articulated a worldview where relevance came from impact, not inheritance. But older guests, particularly those with titles or generational wealth, understood something deeper. Marcus hadn't just made a joke about the king, he'd questioned the fundamental premise upon which their entire social order rested. During bidding for a private dinner with an Oscar-winning director, Marcus's voice cut through the excitement. "That's more money than most families see in a year for one dinner. But hey, at least someone earned the right to charge that much." Half the room erupted in appreciative laughter, the other half fell into uncomfortable silence. Elena Vasquez rose gracefully, taking the microphone with natural authority. "If I may, I think we might be missing something important tonight. I've had the privilege of working with His Majesty on several charitable initiatives, and I've seen something that doesn't make headlines. I've watched him use the platform of the crown to elevate voices that would otherwise go unheard." She paused. "Tonight, we're here because we believe in using our platforms, whatever they are, however we got them, to make the world better. Some inherited platforms built by centuries of service." The applause was complex: appreciation for diplomacy, relief at attempted bridge building, but recognition that Marcus's questions hadn't really been answered, just elegantly deflected. The auction continued, but the evening's center of gravity had shifted permanently. This was no longer a charity gala that happened to include entertainment. This had become a cultural moment, a collision between old and new forms of authority that everyone present understood would extend far beyond this ballroom. I checked my phone and saw the first signs of what was coming. Twitter was lighting up with clips and quotes, hashtags beginning to form, hashtag crown versus comedian, hashtag respect the crown, hashtag earn your respect. The real show was just beginning. By the time the gala's closing remarks began, the digital wildfire had already consumed 3 continents. I refreshed my phone obsessively, watching the story mutate and multiply across platforms with the kind of terrifying speed that makes old media feel prehistoric. TikTok struck first. A 17-year-old with the username @RoyalTruthTeller had somehow captured Marcus's entire joke from the audience, her shaky phone footage already approaching 2 million views. The comment section was a battlefield. "Finally someone said it," crown skull emoji, battling, "show some respect, he's literally the king," Britain flag emoji. Twitter exploded next. The hashtag Crowns Donate Pay Bills was trending in 14 countries, spawning 1,000 variations. Memes flooded the timeline. Charles's frozen smile photoshopped onto everything from McDonald's applications to now hiring signs. Counter memes emerged just as quickly. Historical photos of royal charitable work, statistics about the monarchy's economic contributions, angry threads about destroying centuries of tradition for clout. Instagram stories became a canvas for hot takes. Celebrities who'd been silent at the gala suddenly found their voices. Pop star Zara Mitchell posted a video from her car outside the venue. Just witnessed history. When authenticity meets entitlement, authenticity wins every time. Meanwhile, British actor James Thornfeld shared a thoughtful post defending institutions that connect us to something larger than ourselves. I watched Charles's communications director, Rebecca Morrison, hurry toward the royal table with her phone screen glowing urgently. The conversation was brief but intense, Charles's expression shifting from post-event fatigue to sharp attention. Within minutes, his social media team would be crafting responses to a crisis that hadn't existed 2 hours ago. Marcus Reed, still surrounded by admirers near the bar, seemed genuinely surprised by the scale of the reaction. His follower count was climbing in real time, 50,000 new followers in the first hour alone. Comments flooded his latest Instagram post. "You spoke truth to power. Comedy as resistance. The crown emperor has no clothes." But the backlash was equally fierce. Hashtag Respect the Crown began trending as monarchist accounts mobilized, sharing clips of Charles's charitable work and accusing Marcus of privilege hypocrisy. Royal fan accounts, dormant since the coronation, suddenly activated with coordinated messaging about duty, service, and the attack on British values. The digital chorus had found its voice, and it was screaming in harmony and discord simultaneously, amplifying the ballroom's divided reaction into a global conversation that would define tomorrow's headlines and next week's think pieces. The collision of worlds had become a collision of worldviews, broadcast live to anyone with an internet connection. The service corridor behind the Grosvenor House ballroom hummed with the kind of controlled chaos that follows every high-profile event. Catering staff wheeled away silver trays, security teams coordinated departure schedules, and publicists huddled over phones managing the night's damage or triumph depending on their client. I'd slipped back here using my press credentials, chasing the story that always happens when the cameras stop rolling. The real reactions, the unguarded moments, the conversations that reveal what people actually think when they're not performing for an audience. Charles stood in a small antechamber reserved for VIP departures, surrounded by his inner circle. Gone was the practiced royal composure I'd observed all evening. His bow tie hung loosely around his neck, his usually immaculate hair slightly disheveled from running his hands through it. 30 years, he was saying to his private secretary, Sir Anthony Hartwell, his voice carrying a frustration I'd never heard from him publicly. 30 years I've been preparing for this role, building relationships, proving the monarchy's relevance through service, through environmental advocacy, through genuine connection with people's struggles. And some comedian with a Netflix special thinks he can dismiss all of that with a punchline. Sir Anthony, a veteran of royal crises dating back to the Diana years, spoke with measured calm. "Sir, social media cycles move quickly. By tomorrow, something else will capture their attention." "Will it?" Charles's laugh was bitter. "Look at your phone, Anthony. Look at the numbers. This isn't going away." Rebecca Morrison, his communications director, looked up from her device with an expression that confirmed his fears. "The clip has been shared by every major entertainment account. Late-night shows are already booking segments. We're getting interview requests from news programs in 7 countries." But for every defender, two critics emerged. Grammy winner Jasmine Cole tweeted to her 40 million followers, "Kings and queens are for fairy tales and chessboards. Time to grow up, world. Hashtag earn your crown." Tech billionaire David Kim posted a lengthy LinkedIn essay. "In Silicon Valley, we call inherited authority legacy code, outdated systems that slow progress and create vulnerabilities. Maybe it's time for a democratic upgrade." The most damaging support came from unlikely allies. Lord Pemberton, a minor royal cousin, told BBC Radio, "Perhaps we do need to justify our positions more clearly to younger generations. Charles has always understood this." Even his defenders were questioning him. Charles watched the interview from Clarence House, realizing that justification implied doubt, and doubt, once planted in the soil of public opinion, grew faster than respect. Marcus Reed found himself booked solid with interviews he'd never sought, representing a movement he'd never intended to lead. The joke had become larger than its teller, and both men were discovering that viral moments have their own gravity, pulling everyone involved toward consequences neither could control. The statement came at precisely 2 p.m., released simultaneously across all official royal channels. I watched it live from the BBC newsroom, surrounded by editors trying to decode every word choice, every pause, every micro-expression that might reveal the monarchy's strategy. Charles appeared against the familiar backdrop of his private study, hands folded, posture perfect. But there was something different in his eyes, a weariness that hadn't been there before the gala. "Throughout my life, I have been blessed to serve alongside extraordinary individuals who dedicate themselves to making our world more just, more compassionate, more hopeful," he began, his voice carrying the measured authority of decades in public life. "The work of organizations like the Global Children's Foundation reminds us that service, in all its forms, remains humanity's greatest calling." He paused, and I caught the barely perceptible moment where he seemed to weigh his next words. "The crown has always been, at its heart, an instrument of service, not a symbol of personal achievement, but a reminder of collective responsibility. Tradition does not demand deference. It asks us to honor the continuity of care that connects generations." The statement was masterful in what it didn't say. No mention of Marcus, no direct acknowledgement of the controversy. Instead, a gentle redefinition of royal authority as stewardship rather than dominance. But social media dissected it instantly. "Classy response, but he's still dodging the real question. Hashtag earn your respect." Competed with, "This is why he's the king. Grace under pressure. Hashtag respect the crown." The 24-hour news cycle seized on his careful non-response. "Does the king's silence speak volumes?" wondered BBC's royal correspondent. "Or is this the wisdom of someone who understands that dignified restraint outlasts viral moments?" Charles had chosen diplomacy over defiance. But in a culture that increasingly valued raw authenticity over measured wisdom, even his supporters wondered if grace was enough to win a battle fought in comment sections and trending topics. Within hours, the response split predictably along generational lines. Older viewers praised the dignity, the refusal to descend into public feuding. "This is how a monarch behaves," wrote constitutional historian Sir David Reynolds in The Times. "Above the fray, focused on service rather than ego." But younger audiences saw something else entirely. "He literally said nothing," complained 23-year-old influencer Sophie Chen in a TikTok that garnered 2 million views. "Just fancy words to avoid the actual question. Why does he deserve respect he didn't earn?" The palace press office, monitoring sentiment in real time, watched the metrics with growing unease. Charles's statement had generated respectful coverage from traditional media, but the digital conversation remained firmly in Marcus's favor. Hashtag earn your respect continued trending globally, while hashtag respect the crown struggled to maintain momentum outside royalist echo chambers. International reactions complicated the narrative further. American late-night hosts treated the entire affair as quaint British theater, while European Republicans seized it as evidence of monarchy's fundamental absurdity. Only Commonwealth nations seemed genuinely divided, their own relationships with inherited authority suddenly under scrutiny. Most troubling for palace strategists was the silence from younger royals. Prince William's social media remained diplomatically quiet, while Harry's camp leaked anonymous support for authentic conversations about earned privilege. Even within the royal family, the foundation was shifting. Charles's private secretary, Sir Anthony Hartwell, delivered the evening briefing with characteristic understatement. "Sir, we may need to prepare for a more robust response strategy." Translation: dignified silence wasn't working. The conversation was moving without them, and in the attention economy, invisibility was death. The king had spoken with grace, but grace, it seemed, no longer guaranteed the final word. Marcus Reed appeared on BBC Newsnight exactly 48 hours after the gala, sitting across from Jeremy Paxman with the relaxed confidence of someone who'd found himself accidentally winning a cultural war he'd never declared. "Let me be clear," Marcus said, leaning forward slightly. "This was never about His Majesty personally. Charles seems like a decent man doing what he believes is right. But the system, the idea that some people deserve respect simply because of who their parents were, that's what I was talking about." Paxman pressed harder. "But surely there's value in tradition, in institutions that provide stability." Marcus's laugh was sharp, genuine. "Stability for whom? Look, I respect what the man has accomplished through his own efforts, his environmental work, his charitable initiatives. That's earned respect. But the crown itself, the automatic deference, that's a participation trophy for winning the birth lottery." The interview's viral moment came when Paxman asked about accusations of disrespect. Marcus's response was immediate, unfiltered. "Respect is the crown we all wear, but we have to earn it every single day. With our choices, our work, our impact on the world. Nobody gets to inherit that." Within minutes, #AuthenticityIsTheCrown was trending globally. Young viewers flooded social media with approval, treating Marcus as a champion of meritocracy. But critics seized on what they saw as hypocrisy, a privileged comedian lecturing about earned success. The palace watched the interview with growing alarm. Marcus wasn't backing down, he was doubling down, transforming a single joke into a sustained philosophical challenge to the monarchy's fundamental premise. Charles, reviewing the media briefings in his study, understood that dignified silence was no longer an option. The conversation had moved beyond them, but perhaps it was time to reclaim it. Within a week, the gala joke had metastasized into something neither Charles nor Marcus could have imagined. Protests erupted outside Buckingham Palace, not violent but persistent. Young demonstrators held signs reading, "Earn your crown," while counter-protesters waved Union Jacks and chanted, "God save the King." The divide went global. In Australia, Republican movements gained momentum, using Marcus's words as a rallying cry for their upcoming referendum. Canadian university campuses hosted debates about the monarchy's relevance. Even in monarchist strongholds like Sweden and Norway, questions about inherited authority dominated editorial pages. Elena Vasquez found herself torn between increasingly polarized camps. Her Instagram post defending Charles's charitable work triggered both grateful messages from traditionalists and angry accusations of celebrity bootlicking from progressive followers. She watched her own influence fragment along the same lines dividing the world. Documentary crews descended on both camps. Netflix announced a 3-part series on the future of monarchy. The BBC commissioned Comedy, Culture, and the Crown. Think pieces flooded every major publication, each analyzing the deeper meaning of what everyone now called the gala moment. Marcus's comedy tour sold out globally, audiences treating his shows like political rallies. But the burden of accidental leadership weighed on him. "I just made a joke," he told his manager during a particularly overwhelming day of interview requests. "When did I become the voice of democratic revolution?" Meanwhile, Charles's private moments revealed the king wrestling with impossible choices: defend tradition more aggressively and risk seeming desperate, or adapt and risk undermining the very authority that gave his words weight. The world had chosen sides. Now both men faced the consequences of a moment that had spiraled far beyond their control, forcing decisions that would define not just their legacies, but the future of inherited authority itself. 3 weeks after the gala, Charles stood in the same study where he delivered his careful first response, preparing for what palace insiders were calling the defining speech of his reign. This time, there would be no diplomatic evasion, no measured non-responses. The world was watching, waiting for a king to either defend his crown or redefine it entirely. His communications team had prepared 2 speeches. One reasserted traditional authority with historical gravitas, the other acknowledged the changing world while maintaining royal dignity. Both sat on his desk, representing paths that could either cement his legacy or destroy it. Across London, Marcus Reed faced his own crossroads. His sold-out show at the Apollo was being broadcast live globally, audiences treating it as a cultural event rather than comedy. He could continue the revolution he'd accidentally started or step back from the weight of unwanted leadership. Elena Vasquez watched both men from her hotel room, her own career forever changed by a single evening where she'd tried to bridge worlds that perhaps were never meant to meet. The gala had raised £3.2 million for children's education, but the real question it had raised, whether respect could still be inherited in an age demanding authenticity, remained unanswered. 2 men, 2 philosophies, 2 very different kinds of crowns. The world would soon discover which one would rule the future. In the end, perhaps both Charles and Marcus had learned the same lesson. In the modern age, even kings and comedians serve at the pleasure of the crowd. The only question was whether that crowd valued the dignity of tradition or the power of earned truth. The stage was set. The audience was global. And somewhere between a king's prepared remarks and a comedian's unscripted honesty, the future of authority itself hung in the balance.
Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.